All right, never mind. We actually started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to game number one, our best of three series between Dermas and Gameslayer. Looks like Blues is doing the commentary with us, is going to get his wish to be able to see a double power colony game, as was our initial one before Gameslayer crashed. Hello, Blues. Welcome.
Hello.
Anything else you're looking at here?
This one's going to be a little more generous than the other map. There are 8 geotherms instead of 1, but carbon and silicon are looking pretty awful. With all the silicon really concentrated in one little patch, so we'll see how players try to plan around that.
Yeah, a couple patches of iron, just one good solid area of water. Another one with some adjacency, but not looking too great. Definitely worth noting that there are core samples this game, and I think that may end up playing a pretty significant role here, as resources, as you were saying, are just a bit sparse.
With the core samples, Gameslayer crushing so much of that silicon makes more sense. Makes him more able to try to get that monopoly if he tries.
Certainly, although without underground nukes and with all of this sand around, I do wonder if a monopoly is even possible as long as his opponent pays attention and goes ahead and blows a couple core samples when necessary.
That is fair.
Low iron is what Gameslayer is going to be relying on for HQ1 to push him on through. Cheap steel, he might pull it off, but not a comfortable start for him at all.
Things in general are just going to be very slow and uncomfortable to start with all these prices just starting low. There's no money to be made.
That is true.
So I'm really looking
coming up pretty quick though.
Really looking for someone to be making some sort of play to prepare to move into power quickly. Power already up.
I agree. You're exactly right about that. Power up at $120. Just already. Gameslayer is going to move into the silicon, and he hasn't sold down his silicon yet either, so he does seem to be setting up for some ability to move into solar panels, maybe even at Sol 2.
Steel already very cheap, likely to stay very cheap, so geotherms will be an option, but definitely going to need these goon squads to protect them with the mutinies on the board, so scraping together the cash for that might be a little more difficult.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Geotherms are always one of those weird things where you kind of want steel to be cheap, but something else to be expensive, so you can make the money that you need in order to buy up the goon squads you're going to require to get it done. Interesting use of a goon squad by Dermas, I want to point out. As we were saying, steel's basically worth nothing, iron's worth basically nothing, and yet he's chosen to goon his steel mill here. It's going to protect against power surges once he gets that geotherm he seems to be aiming for down, but seems odd not to save it to go ahead and put on the geotherm itself, as none of the rest of these buildings seem all that important right now.
At the very least, he will be managed to scrape onto HQ level 3, only missing 3 electronics, but just not great, having to rely on only the steel and aluminum.
Yeah, never a really comfortable place to be at all with steel and aluminum at $13 and $7 respectively.
And then this solar flare.
Oh, Dermas is going to be upset about that. I'd be upset about that, personally. Well, Gameslayer already has no debt, pulling in 800 a second in power, and he's got the upgrade to 3. Dermas, not in a happy place. This is seriously a third steel mill, Gameslayer. Like, are you... Fine. It's fine.
New land is available for auction.
Gameslayer also moving into the high water tile with his upgrade. He's actually already committed every single one of his claims from his upgrade, which, even if I don't agree with all of his decisions, aka this third steel mill, I can still definitely appreciate somebody who has a plan when they get to their HQ level. Always good to see.
Right. Sometimes just better to get stuff down instead of agonizing over what the perfect play is.
That's true.
I personally
Turns
would have
out
liked
that if you have any stuff and your opponent has no stuff because you made a play, whereas they just sat there thinking, well, you're going to be in a good spot.
Personally would have liked to see more water. That all...
A little more water out of Gameslayer is what you wanted to see?
Yeah, that's all the way up at $75. Life Sport's also going to be interfering with this power money.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, is maybe commit to a second water tile. You can start building up a stockpile and then go into food very easily. On the other hand, when you're just tearing through upgrades because you're in solar power and your opponent is still sitting around doing literally nothing because they just committed to useless, non-expensive resources, you're probably going to be okay. Although Gameslayer is driving those prices up pretty dramatically for Dermas to let him get back into the game.
I am a bit confused about why Dermas is sitting in quite so much aluminum. Gameslayer did move out of it for a while, but actually I don't think he did.
I don't think he did. He's just been sitting in that high the whole time. I mean, he bought a lot of it to keep upgrading.
Right.
But
so Dermas is just kind of slowing himself down by sitting on so much cash, not interfering with the power market at all. I don't know if he can find a way to catch back up at this point.
no, and Gameslayer's already moving into a hack array, and I kind of just expect power hacks, if I'm being honest with this. He's got 3 solar panels down with a goon already in them. Dermas hasn't done a single thing to try and stop this play at all. He's still behind on upgrades. He doesn't seem to have power down himself, except for one geotherm very far away that he got on an auction. I'm very surprised in a lot of ways he didn't take that geothermal vent right next to his base, and instead choosing to take the one near Gameslayer. I don't actually understand that play at all, in particular because if a superconductor option were to come up, well, you could benefit from that at least. And he already has the Goon Squad down to protect from something like a power surge onto the Geo and then moving into his steel production. I don't understand this geotherm at all.
Most importantly, it'd just be so much faster to put it down right there.
Yes. The standard, this is why you do things close to you option, yeah. Well, Gameslayer's got 37,000 in cash, still a little ways away from upgrading right now, as it does take an awful lot of steel to hit 5. I'm wondering if he cares, or if he's planning on just staying with what he's got for the time being.
He's not too far off from being able to really threaten the majority buy, and there doesn't seem to be an end coming to this power money anytime soon.
Well, he's going to have to fight through it a little bit, because mutinies are available. Dermas managed to land one onto Gameslayer, but that said, Dermas, let's see, has he... No, he hasn't protected any of his own power production. And I think, well, with spies on the board in particular, it'd be very easy for Gameslayer to just spy out a Geo and take it away with a mutiny, or even just freeze it with a power surge to keep his own power extremely strong.
Right.
That's aluminum, not what Gameslayer wanted. There you go.
The other thing that's been going on this whole time is Dermas shipping in all this water from so far away, 0.9 power a second. And he's not doing anything with the water. Doesn't have the claims to do that quite yet.
Oh, now he's going to have him. Should be able to... I imagine he's going to get into food. Gameslayer himself is in food, but as he just tore through upgrades so quickly, he hasn't actually kept his food production up with that. He's only positive 0.3 per second right now with these hacks, so likely going to want to do something about Dermas' farms once they're online to make sure he can keep that market to himself for a while. Also needs to have a little money so that he has the oxygen for his glass kilns. There we go. More steel coming down from Gameslayer. That actually, it doesn't 100% surprise me, but it's partially because this glass seems a little poorly placed. Feels like he might want to move into more of that, or maybe into a different life support resource, but his glass is kind of stuck in pairs because of this cliff right next to his base, or hill, or whatever you want to call it.
Although with him moving into solar panels, that glass being on at all maybe isn't something to be concerned about.
Well, the glass should still be all right. He does have a large silicon stockpile stored up. Man, I can't talk this late at night, apparently.
It's fair, and he is hacking it. Otherwise, I'd wonder if maybe that should just be more power.
Exactly, and that was the other part of it, was the hacks were on the way. Well, speaking of power, Gameslayer did let his debt get away from him at one point, and so making money on power, not really an option for the time being, but he will get to pay down his debt, at least with it a fair ways, and that'll let him continue a pretty long, drawn-out game that he seems to be favoring for whatever reason.
It is pretty impressive that he managed to push to 72,000 dead from power money without taking any auctions.
That's Gameslayer. Electrolysis reactors coming down. He's still in a great position. HQ5 to HQ4. Dermas has a patent lab coming online. We'll finish in just a moment. Headed for superconductor. And the game has decided that Dermas does indeed need this tile for his power production. Picking up Superconductor with 2 geotherms separate from your base. It's almost like Gameslayer or Dermas knew this auction was coming up. Obviously he didn't, but that's almost how it feels. 18,000.
Definitely wonder if by the time that geo actually gets built, if it'll even be relevant anymore.
Yeah, lots of power down for Gameslayer is driving that price down pretty fantastically. That's the danger of building a patent lab. You have to goon squad it with mutinies on the board. I got punished for this earlier this week. I still managed to win, but I basically didn't get to use my patent lab at all. And my opponent just picked up key patents that he needed with it. It was very sad.
I managed to get punished that way all the time in 1v1. I don't understand how I never learn.
Yeah. Seems difficult for people to pick up on, but you will absolutely get that thing mutinied away from you. And on top of that, Gameslayer is picking up the patent that Dermas wanted for whatever reason. The superconductor, and if anything is going to kill power, superconductor with all these solar panels will. Slant drilling going to be up next. Oh, the geo's coming online for Dermas, and well, as you predicted, power's under 100. It'll rebound a little bit before fully crashing out once day hits, and this shortage will help out too. Dermas trying to go ahead and buy up his own stock. He's only about 10,000 off of it. He should succeed in this, as it will take Gameslayer just a little while to get up there, and his food is still exceedingly profitable. They're not quite having the time, I would imagine, to actually finish off Dermas.
Yeah, Dermas will definitely have enough time with at least 16 seconds. So,
yeah, he's going to be just fine.
Otherwise, I was going to be upset at Gameslayer for keeping this slant drilling online, but my game seems to have frozen.
Your game's frozen. Yeah, everybody's frozen. I dropped. Well,
Price manipulations to begin shortly.
Dermas says that Gameslayer wins anyway. Yeah, everybody is still here. I don't know if Dermas is just going to allow the win at this point or not, but
things are slowly starting to catch back up on my end, but yeah.
Dermas says obviously you've got this one though. So I think despite the connection issue, we are going to go ahead and continue forward with that win, according to just a statement like that, and I'll just let you host the next one, since apparently my internet provider has decided that as it is no longer just Charter, and it's now also Time Warner, it needs to be garbage. Which means I need to yell at somebody for that. The solar flare did make it basically unlosable, but I gotta say, Dermas dug his own grave to let that situation happen.
I mean, I'm
to
not
address
sure.
what's going on in chat.
I definitely like the Goon Squad play, but after that,
Yeah.
I mean, there's still a chance if it wasn't for that solar flare, I think. That really just...
No, the solar flare was clearly very difficult to recover from, but man, picking up that Goon Squad, you saw how long after that it took him to get from 2 to 3. If he had just gotten to 3, there was an option to do something, and frankly, maybe even a bit of an overcommitment to Steel, given its initial $30 price.
And maybe the Found itself was perhaps questionable.
Yeah, the Found did feel weird. Dermas was down first that game, wasn't he?
Yes.
Or...
His first to
Yeah.
Found is so far away from the water in particular.
Mm-hmm. Water is always a very important resource. Let's see, both players actually had no debt and no extra cash on the initial Found. Interesting. Just chose exactly at 0. They had no debt and I'm not sure that was even an exactly at 0 position. I mean, if you were going to go with something like that, you were going to need a pretty serious bonus and a leg up. Even something like having a whole bunch of extra cash at the start of the game with resources so cheap. That's one thing I don't think people have quite gotten figured out yet, is this idea that bonus cash at the start is so much more valuable if there's no cash to be made.
It is an interesting point. Not one I
What they
have
could have
thought
afforded
about.
this squad. It's not relevant all that often, but in a game when prices start off completely dead, well, how are you going to get some money? All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to game number 2, our best of 3 series between Dermas and Gameslayer. Solar Flare with a very slow start from Dermas let Gameslayer make quite a lot of money on solar power. Pretty much walked his way onto a game 1 victory. We'll have to see this time if Dermas can pull it back and do a little bit better. Blue's still with us, providing some additional commentary, and I'm very interested to hear what he has to say about this map.
And we have yet another double power colony map. This one a lot more generous with the silicon, so...
But a lot less generous with the geotherms, back down to 1 once again. And carbon not looking too great either, unless you happen to found in the dry ice.
There's also a lot more money to be made with these prices, so maybe we won't be seeing a player get stuck on HQ2 again.
Interesting decision. Dermas is going to go after a scientific start first. Gameslayer immediately ready with the robotic that he clearly wanted. Extra claims available on the market, always an interesting detail, although perhaps overused in 1v1s. We'll have to see what our players can do with these. Dermas has the cash lead for the time being.
I am concerned about Dermas's found exactly. I mean, he does have some carbon nearby or silicon and he has dry ice if he chooses. He needs to find some way into that power very quickly. The scientist always struggles with that a bit.
Yeah, I think it's going to have to be dry ice this game. Oxygen's not great, but it's not dead either, so that's fine. Carbon started off pretty expensive, actually. So maybe moving into the dry ice will not be too bad a thing. We'll just have to see what Dermas decides, though. An additional steel mill
I don't know
could be
about that.
okay, but we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of steel money to be made, but it is an extra power consumer when power is already at 125 and rising at more than 1 a second.
The other thing that's a concern at this point for Dermas is he never picked up aluminum.
Always something a mistake that scientists can make quite easily, and Dermas has done it now. He does have the option to buy a claim if he would like to resolve this situation, and if he does not, and Gameslayer just stores up his aluminum, well, getting to HQ3 might be a bit more difficult than Dermas had anticipated, and in particular, getting down power afterward would be very difficult. Where's that claim going?
High
It is
aluminum.
aluminum.
Alright, so that
Good.
should work out alright.
Yeah.
One thing that I might have been interested to see from Dermas is instead of putting these dry ice right next to his base, maybe put down water pumps first and then transition to dry ice. This is also fine. This lets him transition to wind pretty easily, but there's a lot of money.
Yeah, that is the advantage to them. I do wonder if there was an option to position this a little differently to have maybe slightly better wind, although I think he's on a moderate and a very strong on those 2 tiles, so that will be decent, and he's got another moderate at the end. It's not the best power in the world, but it is acceptable, and you definitely, against power surges and circuit overloads, need to be going for that line with the goon squad, rather than anything else this game, I think.
Gameslayer going for solar panels on HQ2 again.
Well, power's that expensive again.
The black market is online.
Yeah, it seems
see
to
if
have
we
a
can-
little more depth than last time, and no solar flare to help him out, but still paying
Yeah.
off debt very quickly.
He is shipping more than last time, and on top of that, he is shipping at a very, very high price with this expensive power. So, circuit
New land is
overload
available
from
for-
Gameslayer. Maybe slightly mispositioned.
And he could have guaranteed the hit on all.
Yeah, he could have. This was a greedy circuit overload, and he was punished for it. Just to clarify for anybody watching and not sure, if it had landed on the left steel mill, on the westernmost steel mill, would have been guaranteed to hit all targets. You don't have a super long hit onto the 2 wind turbines, but you are guaranteed to hit the 2 wind turbines. And so,
Sold.
a very greedy decision from Gameslayer. I don't want to call it wrong, but you can see he was punished for it here.
I mean, Gameslayer bid up to 16,000 for this water tile, when he's pretty much committed to making our money to, well, not necessarily. Electronics are cheap enough that he could get away without that.
But he probably wants the power money anyway. In either case, Dermas is going to take it for 18,000. Gameslayer's got the upgrade. I kind of expect the third solar panel to come down very, very soon. And immediately it does. And now water is looking very important, which is why I could understand Gameslayer bidding up so high. I do wonder what he's going to do about water now. No Core samples this game to really press on through and be able to ignore that market completely. I'm worried about Dermas's debt, though.
Right.
He just gave up on power when he got circuit overloaded. I don't know if that was really the right decision.
The black market is open.
There's definitely the option of just giving up on power in those two tiles and putting them on the solar condensers.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I thought we were going to see, if I'm being honest, was a shift over toward the solar condensers. Instead, I think one wind turbine even finished before being scrapped, if I remember correctly, which is just 80 carbon that he desperately needed gone, if that's the case.
And this whole time, he's also been letting his steel mills run at 0.6 power a second.
Yeah, and actually added more steel mills to exacerbate that problem. Those are losing him $180 of debt in power a second. 800, 900 now altogether after this upgrade. And now we're moving into water pumps. Well, that's a lot of cash. I'll give Dermas that.
He has this geotherm building way out here.
A robotics
That's
HQ has been
going to be
upgraded.
far too late.
Yeah, far too little, far too late, especially considering he's at D already, and there are
Right.
mutinies available. Gameslayer can just take this if he notices it.
He should know it's not defended. He should know that Dermas can't do anything about that.
And Gameslayer bought pirates.
Pirates. I hate those filthy
Well.
bandits.
Fine.
Oh,
That said, this geo is still not enough to cover power costs. These wind turbines are going to have to come up. There's still the option to circuit overload those in about 45 seconds.
The local union rep is available to the highest bidder.
Were you going to defend the pirate play, and I just kind of ran you over, or...
not seriously.
Oh, okay. I was sitting here thinking, come on, it's a mutiny that makes you $600 a second and gives your opponent $600 of debt a second when he's already in D. How do you pass that up?
Meanwhile, the pirates make maybe 4,000 total.
Congratulations.
Yeah, not very much, because frankly, the pirates, they look nice on paper, but the thing is, Dermas is collecting so much water, he's going to knock this price down so fast that it's really not going to make any real difference in Gameslayer's cash. It's not going to affect Dermas too much. The mutiny was the power play there. The pirates are just kind of wimpy and weak by comparison. That's it. Gameslayer still has $65,000 in cash and can actually threaten Dermas right now if you'd like to. And I think he should. I think Gameslayer should do that.
Right.
Gameslayer should kill his opponent.
Black market
Gameslayer.
is online.
At the 100%.
I'm sending him a message mentally right now. We can accuse me of cheating afterward if we want, but... Because genuinely, if any of you believe that I could actually affect him that way, I'd love to get into that argument with you. I'm doing it. It's working. And Dermas does not have the cash to defend himself either right now, which is a bit of a serious problem for him. All this steel production is just once again way overboard for that market in a 1v1, even with it starting more expensive. Your opponent was in the triple steel mill. And yeah, not much more to say about that one. That was a fast series.
Power just does that.
That was almost a Soul 3 win. It could have been a Soul 3 win if Gameslayer was just paying a little more attention.
Definitely. A little too busy trying to play with the fuel price just a bit.
I'm gonna go for the fancy play instead of winning the game. Turns out it's good to win the game. In any case, I mean, well played to Gameslayer. He did what he needed to do, but I don't know, that felt like a kind of textbook example on how to not handle power. Just letting it go. You can't just give up on it when you got circuit overloaded. It needed to shift somewhere else. there needed to be a cancel on the additional wind turbine if you were going to get rid of the overloaded wind turbine. You reposition those somewhere. It was a nice idea to get solar condensers down and make all this work, but wasn't going to happen this game, apparently.
Right, just in both cases, Gameslayer getting into that power market so much quicker. And Dermas being stuck kind of on his back foot trying to react to it, but not really having a good solution.
Mm-hmm. And way too much steel in both of these games. Way too much steel. I mean, steel's a valuable resource, don't get me wrong, but if you're going to produce steel quite that much, you need to be able to make cash elsewhere to match. And that's something that wasn't really available to Dermas in a game where he had to commit so many tiles to power or die. We went with the or die option, but still, it's not going to work out. Not going to work out to have down 4 steel mills. Seems a common way that a lot of players go ahead and lose the 1v1 these days, is staying in the steel market that heavily, despite the fact that it's crashed. Because maybe this is just me over here. I don't like to scrap out of steel completely most of the time unless I've got a decent stockpile ready to go in 1v1. But you can cut down to just a couple steel mills and let those be your cushion against any shenanigans, in my opinion.
Right, just it's pretty unnatural, even if you're doing the 4 steel mill thing, either split or together. Just have 2 and 2.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, very strange found from Dermas in Game 3 as well, which is something that was touched on immediately, but if we just look at this, Dermas still felt like he was a very long ways away from a viable colony to me. He's got the electrolysis reactors down, and that's fine, but they're still piratable. No teleportation, nowhere close to teleportation when the game ended. A lot of difficulty getting into power. A lot of difficulty getting into the water market in the first place. No chance of getting into the silicon market, really. And not great carbon on top of that, despite being on top of dry ice. I don't like this scientific found at all. The more and more I look at it, ugh.
And he found it first again.
He did. Gameslayer was ready. That was actually one big difference between Gameslayer, these two games, and so many of the other games we've seen, is I see a lot of 1v1s during this tournament where players start, and then somebody takes a found, and the other player is like, oh no, I wanted that found, and then has to search around and go find a different found, and doesn't have it in mind immediately. Whereas both games here, I had to actually think about who found it first, because it was so rapid fire from the first founder to the second founder, and that's how you need it to be in 1v1.
Though in some cases, you can hardly blame the second player for just throwing their hands up in the air.
There are some, but
those are rarer than
they are rare. They're rarer than people think they are, in particular. The other thing is you should have a second spot in mind. Or if you don't have a second spot in mind, you probably should have found it sooner.
Yeah.